Hey, everybody. Welcome to our June DemandJen Jam session. I cannot believe I just literally said the word June and that H2 is like right around the corner. I hope everybody's having a great year. Like I said, if you're clicking in or joining in, let us know where you're joining in from. Let us know if you're a newbie, if this is your very first time to join us on the B2B Growth Show. We'd love to know that. If you're a veteran, you've been here 2 or more times, we'd love to know that as well. And if you've been here before, you know that we love to interact with you guys as we go through the information today. So please chat in your questions, chat in your comments, jump in, share your perspective. This is kind of a hot topic we're going to be covering today. So definitely want to get your spicy hot takes as we go through this today for sure. And so without further ado, I do want to introduce you to our very special guest, one of my my favorite folks on LinkedIn, Jen Allen-Knuth. She is by far one of the coolest voices on the sales side. I ran into her content, about a year ago. Jen, I don't even know how I ran into your content. But when I did, found it on LinkedIn, I just fell in love with it for many reasons, primarily because I feel like Jen's perspective on, buyer first messaging, it really matches well with what we think about on the marketing side of the house. And so, Jen, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so pumped to be joining you today. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you. And Jen, I have to say, you've got like the coolest company name, I think, in sales and marketing. Her company, she's the owner and founder of a company called DemandJen. What a great play on words. Demand Paul doesn't work nearly as well as DemandJen. So I think that's super, super cool. And there is a agenda that should be in your lower thirds or should be showing up on your screen real soon. Be sure to follow along on the agenda. There is a link to Jen's LinkedIn profile and her company page there on the agenda. And man, take a minute right now and just click on her name because that'll take you right to her LinkedIn profile and follow her. Some of the best selling content that you're going to run across. In fact, Will Aiken, another guy that I love a lot on LinkedIn, said that Jen's posts are like TED Talks. And so he kind of meant it in a funny, cringy way, but I think it's actually true. So very much, I think you guys will greatly appreciate the stuff that she shares every day.
Thank you so
also,
much.
We've got Lauren. Lauren's our moderator today. She's going to be moderating chat. You want to say hi, Lauren?
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'll be hanging out with you guys in the chat. It does look like there's a brand new tab for us in the chat today called Q&A. So if you have questions as we go along, just drop them in the Q&A section and I'll take note of them. And when we get to a point where we can talk questions with Jen and Paul, I will bring them up.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. And keep those comments flowing too, because I'll be watching them. I know Jen will as well, just to kind of see what you guys are thinking about. And, like I said at the top of the show here, this is a really interesting topic. I got my start back in the 90s as a sales guy in B2B sales. And I can tell you that sales and marketing alignment didn't exist in the 90s. In fact, I thought the marketer's job back then was basically to put logos on coffee mugs, to go to trade shows, right? They had nothing to do with my success as a seller or making my number. And I think even as we fast forward to today and we think about the role of marketing, it's definitely changed a lot in the last 30 years, but we're still very far apart. And that's really scary, in my opinion, because in today's buyer's world where we have ubiquitous access to knowledge and information, and we're out there passively learning all the time, marketing's got a very critical role in communicating messages to their audience so that when sellers get involved, it's not the first time that they're hearing about the way that we can solve problems and make their businesses work better. And so that's what we're going to try to fix today. And I think we've got one of the best voices around to help us think through that. By the way, Jen, I know you do SKOs. That's a big part of what you do. And then you also do workshops with go-to-market teams. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the most popular ones I do is lots of companies say, outbound is dead, cold outbound is dead, email is dead. I'm not of that belief system whatsoever. And so I'll work with teams on how they're outbounding to target accounts to help them rethink their messaging. So it's really fun because it gives me exposure to tons and tons of messages that people are using. And it makes it a little bit easier for me to pick up on trends of like what's outdated and what's still working and what's not working. So a lot of times when I'm coming in, it's because companies are saying like, our outbound pipeline is drying up. Our discovery calls aren't leading to second calls. We are selling into bigger buying teams. So it's all just sales training workshops for companies that are up against that stuff.
One of the things I do like about, those workshops, and I haven't been to one, but oftentimes you'll come back on LinkedIn and you'll talk about, hey, this is a workshop that we just did. Here's some cool things that we learned. So even just, following along some of your content, people can get a sense of the great work that you do and how you empower go-to-market teams to work better together. So let's bring some of that knowledge to this audience today. And the first thing, if you're following along in the agenda, the first thing that we wanted to talk about was fix the friction, right? I mean, let's face it. We've just talked about 30 years, at least as long as I've been in business, there's been friction. And so to have a little fun with that, I did a post last week. I actually did 2 polls on LinkedIn last week just to ask for some feedback. I'm going to share my screen. And Jen, I'm going to put you on the hot seat here a little bit. And I know you've kind of sat on both sides. You kind of sat on the seller side. You kind of sat in the middle between sellers and marketers. So the first question that we asked was, on the marketing side, what is your biggest frustration with sales right now? And boy, one of them kind of stuck out way more than the others. And so I felt like there were some raw nerves, even when I read some of the comments that showed up. It's just like, hey, sellers never update the CRM, and then followed right by, they don't follow up on our leads. So, hey, Jen, from your perspective, help us, because we want to have empathy with the sales side. We want to help sellers sell more. What's going on there?
Well, I do. So to frame it, I was an 18-year frontline seller, never a sales leader, never a sales manager. Like I was one of those jerks who didn't update the CRM as often as I should have. I think the fact that this is still an issue in today's day and age is wild to me. Like, I get it if a company can't afford a Gong, right? If you're in a smaller business, like a Gong purchase might not make sense. But Gong does this. You can set up Zaps to do this, like Fathom, which is the cheap call recorder I do. This does this. And so I think like when I reflect on this, I think about all the things we want our salespeople doing. Do we actually want them in there doing administrative work instead of having conversations with our prospects and our customers? Like, I just think it's wild that we're even having this conversation anymore with regards to the technology that's available.
Sure.
So I like very, very rarely will you hear me say like, I think tech is the solution to a problem. This is one of those places where I'm like, I think we need to be doing a little bit more due diligence around what things can we automate in tech so that we're only asking them for the big things like forecast accuracy and making sure we're close losting opportunities. So on that piece, like that one, it was surprising me to see that much of a popular answer. On the goes rogue with messaging, like won't follow up on our leads, that makes a lot more sense to me. I will say, having sat on that side of the house, on the sales side, I think one of the things we'll get into later is when we say, we have leads. So like at one of the companies I worked at, we would have the sales and marketing meeting every week. And it was a sales and marketing alignment meeting, which couldn't be farther from the truth of what was actually going on in that meeting. And every week, marketing would bring a dashboard that had everything they do in green, and then most everything that sales is responsible for in red, right? And it was just, we were looking at it in totality. Like, these are all the MQLs that weren't converted within 24 hours. And these are all the MQLs that didn't lead to a call. What's sales doing? What's sales doing? And it's largely a finger pointing exercise, right? When we dug into the leads, what we saw is a lot of the leads were like email addresses that were Gmail accounts or valid email addresses. But the thing that generated the lead was like a person downloaded a white paper that was completely unbranded, that was on another partner's site, and it had nothing suggesting they were interested in a demo. And they're like, why aren't you booking a meeting? And then so when we looked at that and we started segmenting what's the lead source, what we realized was a lot of these non-converted leads were because the sales team didn't understand, how do I action something if the person didn't raise their hand? What am I supposed to do? Just be like, oh, saw you download this white paper. Do you want a demo? That's creepy and weird, right? And no one's
Right.
going to keep downloading our stuff if we do that. So I think often we have to think a little bit more clearly around like, what are the types of sources these leads are coming from? And have we given the sales team ideas around how do you engage a non-hand raiser? So that one, it makes a lot of sense to me, because I think still today we see a lot of teams that are just tracking overall quantity, not looking deeper than that.
Yeah, I will tell you, Jen, there's a little bit of friction because we run into this all the time too. It's like, oh my gosh, we're hitting our lead quota. I don't know why these lazy sales reps that just want leads handed to them on a silver platter, they're not closing enough business. It's not our fault. It's the seller's fault. And the reality is, when you look into it, it's everything that you just said. And so, one of the things we propose is, and we'll get more into this a little bit later on, but it's marketing should own the lead until they become a hand raiser, the majority of that, right? The marketing role is to surround them, to give them good messaging, and not hand off an MQL or whatever we want to call it to a seller and say, go follow up on this. But what's interesting, Jen, is sometimes when we have those conversations and the seller's like, oh, these leads are shit, we don't like them, they're terrible. And we're like, great, here's how we're going to fix that. Marketing's going to own them. We don't even want you to follow up with them until they become hand raisers. And immediately the sellers, most of the time, are like, no. I want all the leads. I want them all. Even though I'm not going to follow up with them, I want them all. How do we deal with that?
Yeah. So it's such a practical explanation of what happens, because the second you take something away from a salesperson, all of a sudden we get really hoardy and we're like, no, that's mine. So what we did, I'm not saying this would work for everybody, but what we did is we said, okay, if it's a hand raiser lead, meaning the person's calling in, they're emailing in, contact me, we want to call, that always goes directly to sales. Make it as easy and effortless as possible to get that booked using whatever, you have. For the learners, what we did is we said, we will give sales first right of refusal.
Oh,
so
that's great.
Let's say you get a lower contact title than you might normally like. So like if I'm selling to CROs, let's say I get a manager of enablement strategy. They're still often involved in the buying committee. So I, as a salesperson, am very interested. But let's say that person downloaded a report on, I don't know, the competitor of status quo. I personally value those, because then what I can do is I can turn around and say, hey, looks like you were digging into this study that we did on status quo. When I looked at the business, it seemed like, you're rolling out a new AI tool. And I wonder if that means that you're seeing status quo as a competitor more often. I might be totally off base, but if you are, I had a couple ideas that worked for another company. Like, would you be open to having that conversation? Like, I want a learner conversation, because a learner is a signal that someone might be confronting a new problem. And I don't want to treat it like a demo, because I will freak that person out and they'll run in the opposite direction and think twice the next time. But there might be people on the sales team who are over their goal, sitting pretty, and they're like, I'm not going to do that work. And the reality is, as much as they should do it, you can't make them do it. So we set a time constraint. And if the seller didn't follow up within a certain period of time, then it was like, okay, that kicks back to marketing, because you had the first right of refusal. You didn't take it. That's the consequence.
I love that. I love that. So that's really good, because when you think about a seller's job, in many ways, it's to create context and consensus, right? So they've got to connect the dots between, hey, we've got this little signal. You downloaded this thing, you went to this thing, whatever. And how does that apply to your business? Let me help you understand how that applies to your business. And then let me help you champion that into the rest of the folks in your organization. And so I love the idea of, let's give them a shot to do that, and let's train them on how to do that, because oftentimes, again, from the marketing perspective, a lot of sellers aren't willing to take that amount of time to go figure that stuff out, right? They really want the, hey, we're ready to sign the contract and get going conversations, not the, hey, I've got to really help you see that this is impacting your business in a negative way. So that's really great, Jen. That's awesome. I love that perspective. Let's own them, but let's give them first right of refusal for them to own them, and then we'll just take them back.
And Mark has a good question. What was that certain amount of time? I think with a learner lead, it's not the same as a hand raiser. Like hand raiser, obviously we care about speed to lead. If someone downloads a report, they're not sitting there being like, this idiot didn't follow up with me in less than 60 minutes. Like, you have a little bit more time. So I can't say for everybody. For us, it was a 48-hour period. And if they didn't follow up within 48 hours, because sometimes it's a more thoughtful outbound motion as well, that felt like a reasonable amount of time. And then, of course, you're going to have hiccups in the system where someone's like, well, I was out and I didn't know. And it's like, you face them as you hit them. But I think when you try to appeal to every unique flower in the sales organization, that's where you end up in a really tricky spot.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, let's flip the script here a little bit and look at what the sales rep said. Now, I will tell you, I guess the folks that follow me on LinkedIn are mostly marketers because I got way more marketer poll responses than I did on the seller side. But here are the big gripes, right? That they treat MQLs as hot leads. I think we kind of talked about that a little bit. And they really don't understand buyers' needs, that the messaging that they're sticking out there is just generic messaging. What do you think about that, Jen?
I have lots of opinions. I have lots of opinions on this. Now, as much as I spent time on the marketing or the sales side, my last year at the Challenger Sales Company, we were talking about this. I started a role called the Chief Evangelist, and the Chief Evangelist basically sat between sales and marketing. And my focal point was like, what is the buyer's experience? I'm not siding with one or the other. Like the ultimate decision maker is how does this look and feel to the buyer? And so like most of the conversations I was having were about like the messaging that we're using, the campaigns that we're sending are so focused on us or our latest thing. And they don't demonstrate to the buyer that we actually have a ton of insight about them. And so the trade-off there is, do you go generic to try to appeal to everybody and talk about yourself, your company, your solution to appeal to everybody, which in turn, I think really appeals to very few people.
Right.
Or do you think differently about what are the places where we know we can win effectively, right? So in our case, it was like its tech was blowing up. There was an issue of, well, gosh, you get all these first-time salespeople who are promoted really quickly into management and have never coached a day in their life. And companies don't tend to spend a lot of time like arming your first-time sales managers. So what if we leaned into that versus saying like, Challenger's the best methodology in the world because we've worked with this company. Like, how do you get closer to what the buyers are talking about in their executive meetings? So the reason I bring up the chief evangelist model is because the way that I defined my job was marketing is advocating the brand, promoting the brand and the products. Sales, in many cases, is doing the same thing, even though they shouldn't be, but they're talking about the same thing. Who is actually the voice of what buyers are talking about in their executive meetings? And so that's what I started doing, was not talking about solutions, but really teeing up the idea that like, here's a problem we keep hearing about. It's specific. It's not generic. It's not like, oh, it's hard to generate pipeline. No shit. It's hard for everybody to generate pipeline, but like getting closer to that. And so in doing so, what happened, and we were chatting about this before, is like you'd get people that would come in and say, I don't even know if I want to look at a sales methodology, but it's like ironic how closely you just define the very thing we were talking about. So I want to learn more about what you know. And so it opened up this really low pressure conversation. I would take that first conversation, and then if there was an opportunity, I would hand that off and say, you know what, I think based on where we are, it might merit looking at this. And I'm going to introduce you to Crystal, and Crystal's going to talk you through it. And so it became a safer way to, one, get closer without sacrificing all the other stuff that marketing has to do, but also recognize like it's a skill gap for a lot of sellers. So that was one approach that worked for us.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because, you know, when you're in marketing, oftentimes we're trying to get a message out there that's going to appeal to the masses. And, you know, if it's not a big priority for me right now, you're not going to get my attention because I'm getting a gazillion messages every day. And so when we can really start speaking to that problem that's keeping me awake at night in a unique way that's not connected to, and we'll get into some of your frameworks here in a minute, that's not necessarily connected to what you're selling me, but you're getting me. Like, you understand I've got this problem and I don't know what to do with it. And now you're giving me some ways to think about it differently. I think that's really key. And in today's world, I think we've got more tools and that are available to us than ever before with AI and all the other things. So that was a lot of fun. And certainly I do feel like, there's a lot for us to think about when it comes to, getting the marketers on the same page with sellers, getting the sellers on the same page with marketers. Let's dig into some of that and some of the things that we've got inside of our agenda here. And the next topic really is this idea of help me, help you. And I actually did a post on this earlier this week where I took that Jerry Maguire clip where, oh my gosh, Who is the guy in Jerry Maguire? I just completely blanked on
I have zero movie memory, so
yeah,
like
Jerry
I'm the worst movie
Maguire
fan
was
ever.
Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is sitting there with and going, "Help me, help you," and he's just looking at gosh, can't remember the other actor now, but anyways, it's just that whole
Did you
scene.
actually watch the movie?
Show you the post.
You did just a long time ago.
It was so long. I just say to myself, half the people watching don't even know that movie. But Jerry Maguire was a great movie, I promise you. But how can marketers help? How can marketers help sellers? And the couple of things I wanted really to dig on, Jen, because you talk about these a lot. One is just the cost of inaction. I really don't think marketers get that a huge percentage of deals end up in no decision. Can you talk a little bit about that and really frame it from a perspective of what can we as marketers do to support sellers in that situation?
Yeah. So if you look at research that's been done on this, on average, 38% of deals that are in your pipeline right now, in your company's pipeline right now, won't be lost because you don't have a good enough product, good enough price, good enough brand, but rather because the customer looked at the solution, sometimes looked you right in the face and said, yes, it's a better way, but I'm okay with good enough. And the problem with that is once I've decided I'm okay with good enough, now a seller goes into what every buyer hates, which is objection handling mode. And now what am I going to do? Like, it's not good enough. Like, I'm not your mother. I can't tell you what's good enough or not good enough
Right.
for you. And so it presents this really problematic issue where we've spent all this time on the front end building pipeline only to have the person give us something that's really impossible, almost impossible to objection handle. And so the reason I love cost of inaction so much is because I think in sales and marketing, we always tend to overcomplicate everything. Like there's always a new friggin' phrase for something that's existed forever because we want to like convince ourselves we've got a new way. But if you really look at human psychology, which I think is all sales and marketing is about, human psychology will tell us that humans are very predictable creatures and we make decisions that go against our best interests all day long throughout our personal lives. Why the hell would we show up to work any different?
Exactly.
Like, I take the example of like when I got married late in life, I was 41. When I got married, I did what most brides do. And I set my alarm every morning for 5 a.m. because I was going to go to the gym every single day to look my best because we got married in Jackson Hole and it was like expensive and we had a great photographer and all this. I never went to the gym. I went to the gym like 3 times because I had started a new job. I was traveling a ton. And candidly, I was just tired.
Right.
And so when I had the decision, it was like I could go to the gym, which sounds terrible in the winter, and I could wake everybody in the house up because we got all these freaking dogs, or I could just sleep in bed. But every single day, what was fascinating is I kept setting my alarm because tomorrow was going to be different. And so when you look at it, what ultimately was happening that I was subconsciously not even aware of was I was good enough with how I looked. Like it wasn't my best, but it was good enough for me. But even still, I kept setting that alarm. And so it's the same thing when we hear claims like we help you generate pipeline faster. Like how many websites, how many emails, how many things say that, even though every CRO I talk to and most CMOs I talk to say, yeah, we need help generating pipeline. If that stuff worked, every one of those cold emails would get a reply. But the problem is we're pitching a solution and there's got to be thousands of solutions to generate pipeline faster. So the reason, to your initial question, why I think marketing has to understand cost of inaction just as well as salespeople is because as human beings, we are not motivated by benefit. We are motivated by risk avoidance. Yet our messaging is almost always built on realize this benefit if you do something. Like ROI by definition is if you do something, which is already problematic, you might see a return. We can't guarantee it, but you might. COI is saying, forget the solution. By changing nothing about how you're solving the problem today, here is this unintended negative consequence. And so one is solution change dependent. The other, forget about the solution. It's just about how you're solving the problem today. And the beauty in it is like we in sales and often in marketing are often so rationally minded. Like if there's a better way, why wouldn't you take it? Well, because we're human beings. We make emotionally like scared decisions all the time. And so where marketing can really have a great seat at the table is how do you use messaging that gets a prospect to reconsider, is good actually good enough before you ever talk about your product? Because as a salesperson, those were the kind of conversations I loved having.
Right.
We just don't like often when I would look at the campaigns that were going out, it's like, we just released this new product. It's like, great. Nobody gives a shit.
Yeah.
So
Nobody
it's
cares.
got to be a mix.
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting because we do, you know, for some reason, we all forget when we're B2B that, that we still are human beings, like you said, Jen, and we make decisions on, based on emotion, not logic. In fact, all last month's Growth Show was all about the psychology of buying. And that's exactly what they talked about. It's like, you know, it's about emotion. And I would submit to you in B2B, our emotions are even higher than in B2C because my gosh, if I make the wrong decision, I'm either going to get fired, I'm going to look bad, I'm going to hurt my company, I'm going to hurt my team. And so I've got all of this pent up angst going into a deal, especially if it's a big deal. And so it might just be easier and safer, which is an emotion, right? I want to be safe. Just to say, yeah, you know, that spreadsheet's good enough, or that campaign's good enough. And so one of the things we talk about, which is very much aligned with what you talk about, is instead of talking about problems, talk about the root cause. So, hey, this isn't working. This is why this is why it's not working. But then connect the dots with, and this is the impact that's having on your business. These are the consequences that that's having. And what that does is it helps people take something that maybe this is not necessarily cost of inaction, like I'm active in a deal, but at least making them aware this might be a priority. This is something that I might need to take a look at, because if I don't, that's going to be, so now we're also playing on emotion. If I don't fix this, oh my gosh, that's going to make me look worse than just ignoring it, which kind of comes to your problem promoter framework, right?
Yeah. And before we get to it, I think one of the most important things, and this is a mistake I made all the time, is like, you can be right and still wrong. You can point out a flaw. I don't know if you get this, but like the second I think you get a founder title and you have a website, everybody loves showing up in your DMs telling you how much your website sucks, right?
Oh,
so it's
yeah.
like, you could be right. Like my first website was terrible. It looked like a child made it. But when someone I don't know shows up and says like, gosh, your website is just tanking your business, that is not the way you would ever greet someone at a party. And so there's this like your baby is ugly tonality to a lot of it. What I think is so important, there's a great quote from Brent Adamson, who wrote The Challenger Sale. And he said, before you tell someone why they're wrong, first tell someone why they're right. Because none of us like to be corrected by a stranger. And so what that means to me as a salesperson is I need to bring a degree of empathy to that assumption that I'm making. So if someone has a shit website and I see that they're a first-time founder, instead of going in and saying, man, your website's ugly, we can make it 100% better and you'll get 10 times more leads, come in from the angle of like, gosh, when I looked into it, it looked like you were 3 months into being a founder. It probably feels totally overwhelming with the amount of things you need to do, and everything feels important. And maybe it's been harder to kind of prioritize like creating a website. Do you even need a website? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Like bring a degree of uncertainty where you're not like pointing a finger, telling someone how much they suck, because candidly, I think being an executive, you get that stuff all day long. You don't need salespeople adding to the fire as well.
Right.
So
I love what Elizabeth
believer
said. She said, compliment sandwich. Start with a level of empathy, right? And I will tell you, Jen, something that I have done differently, even in my LinkedIn content since I've been following you, is I was using more problem language than I wanted to, and I was using I more than I should. And I started following you, and I noticed that you started using the word we, or you are kind of saying, I've been there. Like it was an empathy. And so I've even changed the way that I talk in my social content to be more empathetic, and less. I hadn't thought about it until I think you actually posted about this one day about, hey, that's real condescending. When you come out and say, you've got this problem, that's condescending, but we've all experienced those problems. So that was really helpful to me. And I think using we and empathy words way more than condescending words just seems to work way better.
No one wants to get on their LinkedIn feed and see like, you have a problem, you have a problem, you have a problem on every single post. That's a real quick way to get off LinkedIn.
You suck at ABM. It's like, gosh, I'm so glad I showed up here today so everyone can tell me how much I suck, even though I've never talked to them. Yeah, that's exactly it. If you feel like you're pointing the finger at someone's face, would you ever show up to a trade show and do that? Probably not. So why are we doing it here?
Right. You know, once you've established trust, then you can go in and say, hey, you know, Jen, now that we know each other, let's take a look at your website. There's some things on your website that could be better that might help your conversions. Then that person's going to be way open to, well, what do you got to say about that, Paul? I'd love to learn more about that. But if you start with, hey, Jen, your website sucks, and you need to get it fixed, you're just going to go, no, I don't want anything
That's
to do with
literally
it.
why I hired the person who fixed my website to fix it, because they didn't show up and say your website's terrible. They came in with an angle of like, man, I wonder how hard it is to prioritize doing a website when it seems like you're traveling every week. You just were in Colorado last week. It looks like you're going to this conference next week. And I'm like, man, this is someone who actually took the time to look at my business before they started throwing up about theirs. And that, as a result, it was like, I didn't even look at anybody else, because I'm like, everybody else seems to just want to tell me how ugly my website is. So I think,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, I didn't hire him because he had like a bunch of logos he worked with. I didn't even look into any of that. I just felt like he understood my world. And that was the most important thing. And I think for many customers it is.
That's awesome. Well, let's segue into problem promoter framework, because I love that framework. And just, if you don't mind, just kind of share how that framework works, because there's some really cool, for me, aha moments, and then try to apply it to marketers if you can a little bit.
Yeah. So what problem prompting is when you are sending, let's say you've got a list of target accounts, you're not going to spray and pray them, or please tell me you're not going to, because it's not effective. What you're going to want to do is write an email. But I hate the term personalized emails, because personalization means 85 different things to every single person on the planet. So when I talk about problem prompting, it is the opposite of product pushing. Product pushing, which most cold emails I review, sounds like, hi, my name is Jen. I hope you're well. I noticed you're a VP of sales. Really impressed with your, the work you're doing there. Anyway, we work with these companies and we solve these value proposition statements. And are you free on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, or Friday, or Saturday, or Sunday, or anytime, because I'm desperate? Please take a meeting with me. Love, Jen. Like, that is what most cold emails sound like. Problem prompting is saying, take your company, your solution, everything out of the email. And I know it feels uncomfortable, but the email breaks down this way. Number one, the preview text, which is what your buyer will see when they see you in the inbox view. So they see your subject line. We all know subject lines matter. I never thought about the preview text. I was always saying, I hope you're well. My name is whatever. Make that first sentence something you read, saw, heard, observed that they are trying to achieve as a business. The reason that matters is because your reader is selfish. So what they care about is themselves. We do not need to over narrate it. We don't need to say, I was reading your annual report and I noticed that, because that's I.
Right.
It could be, Christina spoke about using the Series D funding to move up market, building off the wins with Atlassian and G2 and another logo. That tells the reader, I've spent time looking at your funding announcement. I've spent time understanding what you've already done in one sentence. Second sentence connects with the first. As a result of this objective, I'm not sure if this thing is getting harder. So those two have to feed into one another. We are using intentionally unsure tonality, not sure if, seems like you might, seems like maybe, because we're actually inviting a correction. A correction is a reply. So we don't need to be perfect. We just need to be specific. We can't say, looks like you're trying to drive growth. No shit. Like, looks like you just released an AI product that's targeting healthcare organizations in the Cleveland area. Like, you can tell the difference between the level of prep between the first statement and the second statement. So that's your second statement. It's an unsure problem hypothesis. Third sentence is then, instead of saying, well, we worked with this company and drove a 1000% ROI, it's saying this other company was up against something similar, or this other company was weighing the pros and cons of doing A versus B, open to hearing what they did. Either way, loved seeing the whatever personalization you have there. Like, love seeing that you're a fellow Penn Stater if you want to use a college connection. I hate that, but some people eat it up. Either way, saw that you raised money for a rescue shelter. We've got 2 rescues of our own. In my opinion, personalization often lands better at the bottom than the top, because of like that weird left turn you make when it's like, hi, I saw you love rescue dogs. Anyway, like, back to us. So what we're doing there is we're actually not talking about our company or solution at all. What we're teeing up is, I saw this about you. It got me thinking about this other company. I have an idea to share. And why I think that plays so well is, one, it looks different. That's half the battle.
Mm-hmm.
But 2, if you think about why executives go to trade shows and conferences and come to things like this, it's because they are very interested to say, what's everybody else doing? And what are they doing that I'm not? And is it working? Is it not working? And so if we can position ourselves as conduits of that information, then we actually have a hell of a lot more value to offer than just what our product does. Now, that's a one-to-one motion. If we tie it back to marketing, and then I'll wrap up here. I'm a big believer that if you try to write a great relevant email for 100 accounts, you're always going to end up with a watered down wee email. Like, we do this, we do that. But if you write a great email for one account, one prospect, and then on the other side of it, you say, now, who else would be in a problem circumstance similar to that? Now I can get mileage out of that message with some minor tweaks. So as an example, I was working with a company that sells into nonprofits last week, and they had a guy in the room that was targeting a YMCA, that it was a new CEO. So all we did is we went into ChatGPT and said, find me 5 more YMCAs that have had a new CEO appointed in the last month. 5 right there. Give me 5 more. Give me 5 more. And so then you can take the same message and then get scale on the other side. What I tend to see, though, is like, we just scale stuff that isn't working in the hopes that scale will save us. We should only be scaling good stuff. So That's kind of my philosophy on it.
Yeah, I'll tell you a couple of things I wanted to just pile on there. One, we were talking about this before we jumped into the show today, is, the leaders in companies that we're trying to sell to, they all have a gazillion priorities, and they're only able to prioritize a small subset of them, or they have these issues that they're trying to solve. And every year or every quarter, there's only a handful of them or a small percentage of them that they can actually work on. And they on purpose choose to not work on other issues or fires that are in their business. But every one of us that's in leadership has to be in that passive learning mode. Like, yeah, I'm going to work on these handful of things here, and I've got these 80% over here that I can't work on right now. But you better bet I'm going to come to shows like this. I'm going to go to trade shows. I'm going to talk to peers just so I can be aware of what's going on in there. And that's the fissure, I think, that we can step into with this kind of thing. The other point that I wanted to make, which you did a great job, Jen, is, AI and all these tools are just killing personalization in a bad way, right? We think, oh my gosh, we can go and do, research at scale now and find out that this company just got a new CMO, or this company did that, or whatever. And now we can create, quote unquote, like you said, personalized emails at scale. All that is just crap at scale, honestly. And then we think we can send it out to a lot of people. So I love your idea of let's do the homework. Let's figure it out. Let's send it to somebody really important, and then go find other people that same message might work on. And gosh, if you sent 10 of those kinds of emails instead of 1,000 of the other kind, I think you're going to be a lot more successful.
2 of my favorite prompts that I'm teaching sales teams right now to use, but marketers too, is to get to the first line of the email, just prompt. I like, I personally like the paid version of ChatGPT. The O3 model gives the best, most helpful bite-sized stuff. So if you are using it, use O3. And I just ask it, who's the CEO or founder or dean or whatever, the most managing partner, whatever type of firm you're chasing, of this account, and what are their most recent interviews about the company's 2025 growth strategy. You get back the most specific things. And I think that's where the gold is it in the specificity of how you describe what they seem to be trying to do as a business. If your reader is selfish, what you want to be coming in at is at the elevation of the things that they're talking about in their leadership meeting, not like, it takes my engineer 2 hours to do this. They're like, figure it out. It's why we hired you. So You come in at the right elevation. You feel more confident going higher. And then for that second line, the prompt I like is, what would be hard about being the CFO of 3M right now? Like, use that exact verbiage. And then it will say, based on these things that the company is trying to do, these things are hard. Then you can ask it, what are other companies that are talking about those same type of problems? So I think the beauty right now is it's never been easier to do the right thing. The problem before was it takes too long to do the research, which is fair. Now it doesn't, we don't have that excuse anymore. So instead of just like hitting the easy button, being like, write my email and write it for 1,000 companies, like, let's actually do the right work, because it's enabled us to be able to do it. But yet it's a human desire. We want to hit the easy button. So people still don't do it.
Right. I know we're going to talk about ABM here in a little bit, and that's going to be a fun can of worms to open up, but because, that some of that plays in big time there. One of the things I'm looking at some of my notes that I took to get ready for today, and I wanted to have a little bit of a conversation around learner versus lead, because I know you talk about that. We've kind of touched on that already, but one thing that we did, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, Jen, completely independent. So this is why I think this was such a great, it was so awesome to have you on the show today, because we think so similarly about these things. But a year ago, we made a decision to change in our CRM lifecycle stages to learner versus lead. And so we like people that come to our growth show or people that follow us in social media or whatever the case may be. They are learners. And for the most part, we're tracking them from a marketing perspective and really trying to segment them in what topics do they care about, what things do they consume from us so that we can serve them. So it's almost like we want to be Netflix, like, hey, you watch this show, here's 5 other shows you might like. And until they show us that they have any interest in buying something from us, we just act like Netflix, to use that as an analogy. We just want to keep the hits coming to them. And then once they become ready to talk, we believe that they're going to reach out to us and say, hey, I'm ready to talk. And I know that you kind of preach the same thing on your end. And I love the concept that I heard you talk about in a recent webinar with the Women in Sales. And that was this call to learn instead of a call to action. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So first of all, I love that you've done this because I think buyers love it. And we should always be doing things that buyers love, not just stuff that we love. Let's take, for example, this show. Anytime I've ever signed up for a webinar, went to a trade show, downloaded anything, I'm just waiting for the email to come that says, thank you for downloading our white paper. Thank you for showing up to our booth. Thank you for coming to our attendee. And as someone who loves learning and goes to a lot of stuff, anytime I see that preview text, I'm like, I know it's coming. Like they're going to ask me for a demo and you just hit delete. So I think part of it is sounding different up front and then leading to the call to learn that you mentioned. So as an example, if I'm on a show and I'm reaching out, I would say like the topic of the show is the subject line. So if we talked about discovery, or for today, like we talked about learners versus hand raisers, that would be my subject line. And then the first line of the email, instead of saying, thank you for coming, I'm saying something like, not sure if you join because the team is looking for creative ways to engage MQLs, using that unsure tonality. Mm-hmm. But here's something we didn't cover on the show today.
I love that.
5 questions to ask, right? Or like a way to structure your CRM, and you just something that you can put at the bottom of the email that is not a big content asset link thing that they have to click into, because then you run into potential deliverability issues. And then either way, thanks for joining. If content like this helps, let me know and I can share some more ideas. And so what you're positioning yourself is not someone who's going to be a nuisance and like cadence the hell out of you, but someone who has things that you don't have access to, but you're helpful in nature. Like, I'll give you more. But I think it's important to not make assumptions. There's plenty of times people show up to webinars because like, my boss made me, I don't even care about this. So I'm not going to say you must be struggling with discovery. You must be struggling to convert MQLs just because you came to a show. I think half the battle is just sounding different in that upfront.
Yeah, I actually love that. And that is so, like, if I was on the other end of that, I feel like if I got this email, it was a follow-up from Vindy after a show like this, or somebody at Vindy, it was like, hey, thanks a lot for coming. Here's something we didn't cover that you might find interesting. That is, value first, big time. It's, empathy, but it's also giving us an opportunity to create a signal on the back end. So one of the things we talk about at Vindy, we're moving into this clickless world where we don't want to have a lot of gates. We don't want to have a lot of forms. We just want to serve buyers, but we want to do things that get buyers to throw off first party signals that we can see, that we can use to kind of see where they are in their journey so that we can serve them better. And so having an email like that isn't a sales forward email, but it's a way for them to throw a signal, because maybe you have a little checklist, or maybe you have a little thing that you didn't cover in that webinar that they go and click and see. And now they've thrown off another signal that can help change their lead score or segment them into another list. So totally. That's great. What are your thoughts on just like clickless future and our websites being the cornerstone?
Why are we making it harder for people to access the stuff we want them to see? Like, I get it. If you have a truly awesome original research report, which I think are so few and far in between right now, and I'm dying for more companies to do good work here. But if you've got something like that, gate it. I'm cool with that. But if you were like putting out a report that says like 75% of sellers who use AI hit their grade, 76% of marketers think that demand generation is important, like, you better not be gating that shit, because your buyer is going to be even more frustrated on the other side of it. And they're going to think twice if they're going to engage in content again. So I think it's a trust building thing. I think it's perfectly fine to gate things that are like really, really high value, but that's not a lot of the marketing content, if we're honest. So,
You mean I can't just go to ChatGPT and ask it to write the top 20 things to do for this and then put it in front of it?
I saw someone gating case studies the other day. I was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you gating that? I would love it if a customer wanted to read a case study. Normally they don't care.
Yeah.
So it's it's wild out there.
They'd have to want to read that case study pretty badly.
I need to know. Exactly. Was it a 10-time or 15-time ROI?
I've got to know what you did for XYZ company. Surely there's some great insights in there. Yeah, no kidding.
Not biased at all.
Yeah, no kidding. One of the things, that we're seeing and we're talking to clients about and prospects about and just our audience in general is that your website really doesn't have to be the cornerstone of everything anymore. That one of the themes that we talk about is becoming a go-to resource. And by becoming a go-to resource, we really have to go to them. Like we have to go hang out where they're spending time online. Jen, I was telling you that story right before we jumped on today about our biggest client that we've signed up in the last year or so, DM'd me on LinkedIn back in December. They signed up like 30 days later. And when we tracked them through our HubSpot instance, they had never been to our website. They never filled out a form. They had never come to a jam session or a growth show. They hadn't consumed anything on our website. They had been following us and me personally on LinkedIn for about 4 years. And then literally just DM'd and said, hey, I'm a new CMO at a new company. We don't get B2B. You get B2B. Can you help? And that's the world that we're heading into. And so as marketers and sellers, we've got to quit thinking about our website as being the place where all of this stuff happens. We've got to go. And why I think, Jen, you do a wonderful job of this. You're using LinkedIn as your platform and collaborations, Will Aiken and other people like that is a way of just sharing your knowledge with as many people as possible. And I think we all have to think that way moving forward.
Yeah. I think first, I wouldn't have a business without LinkedIn because of that very reason. But I think the way that I think about it is you want to be teaching where your customers go to learn. And often when I ask the question, do you actually know where your customers are going to learn? Like everybody in the room kind of looks at you and is like, not really. Like we actually really don't. So we first and foremost have to understand you have customers, ask them like when something is disruptive in their world, where's the first person they turn to? What's the first resource they turn to? And that I think is half the battle is just learning like your buyer learns and then thinking about what helpful things can we teach them before we start talking about our stuff.
Right. And that's trying to get them to come to your website is ridiculous. Like we don't go to LinkedIn or social platforms thinking, oh, I can't wait to find some clickbaity post that's going to make me want to go to somebody's website. Right. Yeah. We've got to have channel appropriate content that's, that I think you model that extremely well. We're kind of talking about the middle of the funnel right now. So because this, this learner versus lead and, there is this time period where somebody is passively learning. They're becoming exposed to our brand and the problems that we solve. They're not ready to talk to sales. In fact, every study that we've seen, they're pushing off that moment to the very last minute. What can we do as marketers and sellers to win that mid-funnel? Do you have thoughts on that, Jen?
Yeah. So I mentioned that I spent like 18 years at the company behind the Challenger sale, and people have their opinions on sales methodologies, rightfully so. There was a second book in the Challenger series called Challenger Customer, and it was totally like the redheaded stepchild. Everybody knew about the Challenger sale, like barely anybody knew about the Challenger Customer. It was actually a phenomenal book.
It's a great book. I've read it. It's right here on my bookshelf. It's a good book.
So I actually, in many ways, think it's better than the original. But one of the things they talk about on the marketing side there is when you're thinking about content and you're thinking about middle of funnel campaigns, there's this motion they describe, which is spark, introduce, and confront. Spark is something bite-sized early that gets someone to think differently about the problem. So if we think, I'll just use the context of my world. I'm a sales trainer. I help companies who are up against like losing deals to status quo. And so a spark piece of content early might sound like 38% of deals on average are lost to status quo, right? And it's just like trying to get someone to say, that seems awfully large. Introduce, which is middle of the funnel, is now giving someone a little bit more. So here's what status quo actually sounds like, because most of us don't have it in the close loss pipeline. It's like timing and budget and call me back in 6 months. You're kind of like now breadcrumbing a little bit more. And then confront, which is also mid-funnel, is now let me show you a way to size the pain for you. So an example of that might be, here's a way to look at your close lost pipeline from January through June and tally up how much pipeline value you've lost to status quo. So I can't tell you because I don't work at your company. I don't see your, but I can tell you a formula to size it. And what I'm trying to do in that mid-stage confront motion is allow you to size the pain so that you can determine, is this one of those big fires or is this a baby fire we can tolerate? And by the way, we don't get to decide that for the buyer. It's literally just giving them the information, because the other beautiful thing about this, and we always see ROI calculators. I never see COI calculators, is like if a customer realizes or prospect realizes, oh my gosh, this thing is actually way bigger than we realized. This happened with me in an account. Like I told them to do this exercise. They came back. They said, we've got $90 million.
Oh my gosh.
In closed lost pipeline that we now realize is we have a huge status quo problem. Now it's their idea because they were the one that hit the enter key and they were the one that saw the 90 million. And so now how much easier is it to sell a $2 million sales transformation on a $90 million problem? Right. And we're not even saying we're going to solve 90 million of it. We're like, what if we can get 10% of that fixed? That's a $9 million increase. Like now we're having a business conversation. We're not having an ROI conversation. So I'm a huge fan of that like spark, introduce, confront model that's talked about in Challenger Customer, because I think it's really in service of the buyer making sense of their own business problems.
Yeah, man, I love what you just said there. It's really about having a conversation about business problems, not about ROI. And I think all of us need to go build a cost of inaction calculator right now, get it on our website. That's a great idea. You know, some of the things we're trying to do to win the mid funnel and what we talk to our clients about is like this show is an example of that. We want to build a community of folks, and we want to help as many people as we can. In the process of that, share our point of view so that they kind of understand, hey, we're not a performance marketing company that's going to go run a bunch of display ads and generate a bunch of MQLs for you. We do something different. We help you grow your pipeline differently. But that's not the primary theme. The primary theme is we want to help you stay ahead. We're going to bring great people like Jen together to help you think about your business and stay ahead. And in that process, we're building trust. We're giving them things to think about, like you're talking about. And, you know, we really do believe there's a Harvard Business Review that came out a couple of years ago that said, when I start making that fire a priority fire, like I'm going to go work on this fire, I've already got 3 to 5 vendors in mind. Like, okay, I think Vindy can help with that, or I think this other company can help with that. They've already got some ideas of who those vendors are in their brain. On the other end of that study that Harvard Business Review did, they end up buying from one of those 3 to 5 90% of the time. So if we're not one of those vendors that's in their mind, we got to win that mind share. Then we're going to lose. And so the middle of funnel is something we have to own, but we can't get there with MQLs anymore. Like that, like 2 years ago, that's what we thought in middle of the funnel was. Oh, they downloaded this gated ebook and now they're in our HubSpot and now we can nurture sequence them. That's not what middle of the funnel or winning middle of the funnel is all about at all anymore.
And by the way, how much better are those sales calls, right? Because they're not like, what do you think? And what do you stand for? And what do you get? Like they already know all of that. So the sales cycle moves so much faster because you're not having to build credibility in the first sales call. You've already done that when they're listening to your shows and reading your thoughts. Like that's the part that I think is most enticing as a salesperson is the speed of the sales motion.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just looking at our agenda and also looking at the time. We're running out of time very quickly. This has been a great conversation. I do want to arm wrestle with you a little bit on ABM though. We gotta take the ABM battle. We got to take it on, Jen. We got to see who's going to win the battle here, because we were talking about ABM before we jumped on today. And Jen said, even though ABM is 3 letters, she swears it's a 4-letter word. Tell me a little bit about that, right? What is it that you hate about ABM?
Because it means something different to literally every single person you ask. And as a salesperson, when I hear ABM, what that makes me think is, oh, we're going to go out and buy a bunch of expensive tooling and I'm going to get some shit on the other side and marketing is going to defend it. Like, I think it's really important. And this is particularly true right now. I don't know if you all see this, but like, I feel like every day I'm on LinkedIn, someone's trying to invent a new go-to-market strategy and invent something new. And all that does is create mistrust with your sales team because it just feels like you're looking for a shiny object. And that's my beef with ABM. What you described as ABM I love. But why do we need to say some marketing term for it? Just tell people you're going to identify accounts that make sense for the business, and we're going to put extra effort for that. Like every salesperson wants to hear that. You say ABM and everyone's like, oh man.
I know. It's one of those terrible acronyms. Marketers are awful about acronyms. Man, we have so many acronyms. And ABM is one of those. And I think so many vendors out there have kind of ruined it for us because, and I won't name names, but to a lot of people, ABM means buy a software product, run display ads to people that are showing intent data, and then give your sales reps access to this information. And all of a sudden the sales rep's like, okay, I've got access to this technology and it's just showing me these logos are in market. I don't even know what that means. I don't even know who the cutoff is or the point of contact is. And you want me to go follow up with these people. That's almost worse than a Gmail. Like, here's a Gmail MQL. No, I don't even know who the people are. These are the 10 companies that are looking for our services. You go figure it out, sales guy. And oh, by the way, we're spending $100,000 a month running display ads to them. We don't know who, but we're running display ads to them. And that is an ABM that doesn't work at all. But having a target account list, having partnership with sales, I think that's a really good way to bring all of this stuff together and to work in partnership with sellers. I mean, one of the key things I wanted to make sure that we drove home today was, man, we as marketers, we can't be working over here in the right side of things and marketing these guys and spending all this advertising spend and trying to create awareness. And then our sellers are over here, in the desert, knocking on doors with people that have never heard of them before. Our job as marketers, we got to make sure that when that seller reaches out and sends that problem prompter email, that they've heard of you before, right? It's not the first time they've ever heard of your company. And so that's really the key thing. Hey, as we wrap up here, Jen, any big takeaways? I know we've covered a lot of topics today, but if there was like one or two things you want the marketing audience to think about and to do differently, like the rest of this week, starting next week, starting in H2, what are some things we should think differently about in our business?
Yep. So I would say the big one would be, we all complain about pipeline generation, but when I say, what does an email look like a cadence email, a marketing email, a personalized email, like I usually get an empty stare of like, I don't know, I haven't looked. We have to inspect the messaging we're using. And so one very easy, completely free way you can do that is just take one big Google sheet, ask your sales team, pick a target account you want to win, write a cold email to them, put the name of then the prospect title in, and then look at what the sales side is sending out. If they're sending out product push emails, and then you look at the marketing side and we're sending out product push emails, it begs the question, why do you need two teams doing it, right? And that's where I would say, then get into a conversation combined with product, marketing, and sales leadership and CEO ideally, and say, what is it that we believe is the cost of inaction for this vertical, for this type of client, whatever the case may be? Like, pick a use case first. And then say, if we had to defend this investment to our CFO, if we were the buyer, how would we explain why we couldn't stick with the same? And don't have any ROI or you're missing out on, that's just inverted ROI. So I think cost of inaction, taking an assessment of current state are the two places I would say are no-brainer starts. And then the second one would be look at the messaging you're using on the back end of like a learner downloading or engaging with your stuff. Are you freaking them out by trying to push for a demo too quick?
Yeah, those are all really good. And they can, those concepts, Jen, can play well, not just in email, they can play well all over the place, right? And so we were joking about this before we jumped on today. Like, I get like 75, 80% of the emails in my inbox are spam emails, what I would call spam. A lot of people call them cold emails, and none of them are doing that, right? So if you want to stand out and you want your email to get noticed or your message to get noticed, talking about cost of inaction, making it super relatable is the way to go. Jen, I did put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the agenda. I put a link to your website. I know you've got this new podcast or YouTube show coming up. It's all about AI prompts, and you gave us a couple of really good ones today. Where can people sign up for that or learn more about that?
So if you go to my website, www.demandjen.com, and sign up for the newsletter, that's how I'll announce it when it comes out. But let me be clear, this is not another like, you're going to lose your job if you don't use AI. Like, I built this show out of frustration because I feel like everybody talks about you need to use AI, but nobody ever gets to the how. So it's going to be a 10-minute episode, just very quick hit. Here's what the problem we're trying to solve. Here's why it's a better experience for the buyer. Here's the prompt. No like jargon, no 80-step workflows, just simple things. It's meant for a beginner. So I'm
That's
looking forward to
awesome.
learning too.
I'm telling you, the 2 prompts you gave us on this show are so practical and useful. And it seems like half the stuff I see people on LinkedIn talking about AI prompts are like, oh my God. I mean, that's not going to be that helpful. So, I mean, these are really practical things. Jen, thank you so much for joining us. Really great conversation. We've got a great show in store next month. We're going to be talking about SEO versus LMO. And by the way, there's a million talk about acronyms and us in marketing, right? Nobody can even understand what LMO is yet. Some people call it AI SEO, but it's really how do you get your business to start showing up in the chat GPTs, the perplexities, all of those things. We've got a great return guest for us coming on next month. We're going to be really tackling that. So I hope you can join us on that. And Jen, thank you so much. You've been a great guest. And for everybody else, we'll see you next month. Y'all have a great day.